Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Katya, and I'm a product manager at Fluke Biomedical. I hope everyone is doing well and is staying safe today. Welcome to the new Empower series webinar by Fluke Biomedical. And today we will discuss the important process of documentation and archival of results in medical device testing. Properly recording, documenting, and storing your test results for traceability and compliance is just as important as the test itself. So we decided to share our best practices with you on how to do that in the most effective manner. Today, I'll be presenting together with our Global Training Manager at Fluke Biomedical, Jerry Zion. Hi, Jerry.
Hello.
Jerry spent a tremendous number of years in the biomedical industry. Jerry, please tell us more about where your expertise on the matter comes from.
Well, I actually started out as a hospital biomedical technician, actually an assistant technician, and that was back over 40 years ago now. And I've worked in hospital industry for about 10 years, and then in the medical device side up until the last 16 years or so, I've worked here at Fluke. And I'm very happy to have come out of the hospital biomed ranks and have had such a broad-based experience in hospital, in our manufacturers of medical devices, and now in test and measurement, and to have had experiences like that all over the world. So I'm glad to be here and share with you.
Hey, Jerry, welcome. And before we get into the content, I wanted to quickly remind you to please make sure that you send your questions to us via a Q&A, just like Dan mentioned before. And you send all of your questions to all panelists, so to make sure that we can see them and we can timely respond to them when it comes to the Q&A part. All right, so this particular announcement is about 4 or 5 webinars old now, but I will still share it with those of you who have not heard it yet. You are now able to receive ACI credits for watching our Empower webinar series. It's a series of educational webinars by Fluke Biomedical. In this series, we cover all sorts of topics that you may be interested in as a biomedical professional, and what we do here is we share our best practices, expert knowledge, and of course, we answer all of your questions. And if you would like to watch any and all of the Empower series webinars that we have already done this year, please go to flukebiomedical.com, click on Knowledge Center, and then click on Webinars. And you will be able to view all of the webinars that we've done so far, and you will be able to watch them anytime you want. Everything is absolutely free, and you can share those links with your colleagues as well. So flukebiomedical.com, Knowledge Center, Webinars. And before we dive into the presentation right now, let me give you a little bit of information on how to get credit for this webinar that we're doing today. There are 3 simple steps that you should take if you want to receive credit for watching the Fluke Biomedical Empower webinar. First of all, you need to attend the webinar that you are doing right now. There's a minimum duration requirement that you will have to complete in order to receive the certificate. You will have to watch at least primary content of the webinar, which usually takes about 30 to 40 minutes. So basically everything up to the Q&A portion of the webinar. We'll always encourage you to stay through the Q&A as well, because there's a lot of great information that we share with you guys there as well. But if you stay through the Q&A or not is not going to affect your credit. That is absolutely optional. Step number 2 would be to receive a link by email from Fluke Biomedical within the next 48 hours after we have the webinar. Watch out for the email, please. Look at your spam folder. The link will be available to you for 24 hours after it has been sent to you. Please access the link, fill out the survey, and you will be able to see your certificate right then, which is the easiest 3rd step. You will submit the survey, you will see your certificate, you can download it from the website. Very easy. All right, now let's tackle paperwork. So today we will talk about why paperwork can be an absolute nightmare, what are the ways to avoid that and document more effectively, and eventually what we recommend for you to do to keep your documentation and archival processes in such a great shape that it will forever alleviate your audit anxiety. I guess we'll start today by asking you, do you like doing paperwork? Think about the last time that you had to deal with it as a tech or as a manager, and let us know in the chat. Do you like doing paperwork? We have a few options for you here, actually. First one would be, I love doing paperwork. I wish there was more of it. Option B, I do not like spending hours on documentation. And option C, paperwork does not bother me. What would be your response to this? A, B, or C? Do you like doing paperwork? I see many B questions, both in the chat and in the Q&A. And honestly, there's no right or wrong answer here to this question. But if we had to take a wild guess, we would assume that you do not really like dealing with paperwork, which is absolutely okay. And today we will share with you different ways to turn it into a much more positive experience. We'll begin today by introducing you to Joe. He is our fellow biomedical technician. He is 27 years old and he started his job in a biomed shop of a local hospital only 6 months ago. Even though it has been a few months for him, he's still learning the craft of clinical engineering, and just like everybody else in his shop, he documents his test results on paper and he stores them in file cabinets in the shop. Is Joe a happy fellow? Not necessarily. He faces typical problems associated with documenting on paper. Well, first of all, he has a long list of work orders. When it comes to setting up the devices for a test procedure, he's not sure how to make connections between the device under test and the test tool. There are so many makes and models of medical equipment in his hospital that he sometimes gets puzzled and he doesn't exactly know how to make those connections. He spends extra time reading test results off of the test tool, and then he records them manually on a sheet of paper. Then he needs to attach those test results to the work order, which, is another time-consuming task. Then, the test records that he has made in the past get misplaced, which, gives frustration both to him and to his manager. And at some point, it turns out that, at some point when he was doing his test, he missed a step in the test procedure and, or, he made some other mistake. I mean, he is still learning. He only started 6 months ago, so we need to cut him some slack. But what that means is that he will have to do some rework. And this is just as frustrating as all of the above. So Jerry, would you like to comment a little bit on, the typical issues of the manual workflow that we just described and kind of give a synopsis of what can go wrong there?
Yeah, so to a lot of us, this may seem like, yeah, who still does that? But frankly, a lot of you do, and a lot more of you than you think. Maybe not so much in the USA, but outside the United States and into other emerging market parts of the world, pen and paper documentation is not so unusual. Manually operating test equipment by pushing the front panel buttons is not unusual at all, even here in the US. So all of these things, remember what it was like for you when you were first starting as a biomed. And one thing that we didn't highlight here that is also a bit of a problem for a young person like Joe is more than one brand and model of test instrument. So he's going to do electrical safety tests, but he's got 3 different electrical safety analyzers and he has to learn them all, and they're all a little different. So making the connections properly, pushing the right button at the right time, and following a workflow of the test procedure itself, step by step, can be really, really troubling. And then when you have to write down your results, the measurements that you're making on the form, there's misspellings, things like that that are not too friendly for you to have to deal with too, and that causes a lot of the rework. So you can imagine for yourself kind of what this is like in a manual push button testing world for your test instrument. A lot of different brands and models of medical devices that you need to test, and remember how to make the connections and where your reference test points are, can be trouble.
Exactly. Thank you, Jerry, for the comments. And yeah, so documenting on paper may be a very time-consuming and cumbersome process. And we've been studying this, and we've done a lot of research on the subject. We've spoken to hundreds of biomeds across the globe, and this is what we found. On average, biomeds spend about 50% of their work time on paperwork. Isn't that a little bit crazy? Maybe. Documenting and properly storing results is absolutely critical. It is critical for traceability, for compliance, but we believe that there's got to be a better way to do it more efficiently. Harvard Business Review and Deloitte also did research on work productivity, and they found the following. According to their data, 6.5 hours per week is lost by each employee solely due to lack of standardization on processes and tools. And Deloitte here on the right reminds us that on average, it takes each person quite a while to onboard and become proficient at what they do. It's 8 to 12 months to learn or to train a new employee, which is, quite a lot of time. And with that, speaking of training, let's talk about the person who would need to train Joe on his job and deal with that situation. Let's talk about Joe's manager. Her name is Sally, and her job was to hire Joe 6 months ago and ensure that he gets trained as a tech. So she's a manager at Joe's shop. She is 39 years old, and she herself started as a biomed about 12 years ago. She started as a tech as well, so she knows perfectly well what the job entails. She has a great team in her shop right now, and she sees their pain points. She sees their pain when it comes to documentation, and she has her own problems with paper documentation as well. So she's looking to improve the situation. We'll let Jerry here speak, from his experience on the problems and the pressure that Sally is facing as a biomedical manager.
Well, so Sally also does not have enough time to get to everything. She's trying to keep up with regulations and audits and making sure that she is making those happen. She has throughput targets that are difficult to meet because she can't hire any new staff. And she has pressure to produce and reduce the cost of repair and cost of ownership of the whole inventory of medical devices in the hospital. She has deadlines, other deadlines, and so forth, and resistance to change. So the audit is something that's going to happen from Joint Commission or someone like that who is accrediting the hospital. That affects their income from Medicare and Medicaid. So these are some of the problems. So Sally's big job is reducing cost, managing, making sure that everybody that she gets to have on her staff and her team are doing things right, so you only have to do it first one time. And then she's also got to make sure that we pass the audits so that we don't reduce the amount of income for the hospital. So those are some really, really big pressures that Sally has to face. And sometimes it makes people in Sally's position a little bit terse and upsetting when you try to deal with them. Sally has all of these issues to deal with, not enough time, yada, yada. she has to have her team, that's all of us if we work for Sally, making sure that we get it right, that we follow a workflow, a procedure, step by step, everybody does it the same way. We get good measurement results, there's no typos, there's no misspelling, any of that. And then that's all in preparation for the auditor who's going to come in and audit the hospital's biomed department as part of the environment of care to ensure safety and that the hospital is following its policy and procedures. So these are all really, really important to everything that is going to get done. So Sally decides she's got to do something because what she's been doing with test instruments you have to push the buttons on and remember to write down things isn't working well for her. So she finds and discovers a test instrument that she can get a demo unit for that has a little bit of automation on board so that the person like Joe doesn't have to know exactly which buttons to push in which sequence, and there's a little bit more of a test procedure workflow that can be automatically followed, so everybody does the tests in the same order and the same way every time. This one uses auto sequences, so that's just automatically going through step by step on the test procedure, presenting you, the technician, or Joe, the technician, with the next thing that needs to be done. So now what she can do with this demo unit is run some multiple test steps with the push of a button, pull the test results directly off that test instrument. And Sally likes this, so she adopts this test instrument that has onboard automation, and it begins to solve some of her problems, but she still has a few. So some of the problems that remain are multiple sources of test results. So it's not just this one test instrument that had onboard automation that she's having the trouble with. She's got, say this was a electrical safety analyzer, she still has a defibrillator analyzer and patient monitor simulators that she has to deal with in rather the same way. And she does not yet have even onboard automation for those test instruments. So she's still got some multiple sources of test results that are problematic, and the test instrument setup and learning curve is still there, although it's improved a little bit.
Exactly. So she has improved a significant part of her documentation processes for her shop. So you would think that right now she has a solution on her hands that would allow her to have everything in place and successfully pass audits. But enter Steve, the plot twist. Our Steve looks a little bit grumpy. He's an auditor, and he came to Sally's shop to check for regulation compliance. We don't really know that much about him. We only know that he is 46 years old. We do not really know what his background is, what his experience is, but he is there to check on our shop and see how things are going there. So he starts conducting an audit on Sally's shop. And Sally gets burned by Steve. Because after Steve audits the shop, he writes for a citation because there are still some records that were taken and transferred manually, and they're still missing. They're still missing test report sheets. There's some results, even though they were recorded correctly, they were tied to the wrong assets. Some of the test results were illegible. Some dates were stated incorrectly. Some test results were just simply incomplete. And some of the assets had multiple test reports per DUT, which is just not ideal. So what are the takeaways here from this for both Sally and Steve? Even though test tools with onboard automation relieved some of the pain points for paper documentation that Sally and her biomeds had in the past, there's still no standard process that is being followed. And all of this, unfortunately, only increases patient risk. And our ultimate goal here is to reduce that. So I guess the takeaway here is that even though onboard automation relieved a lot of the pains for Sally and her biomeds, she still needs to look for better ways to document her test results. Which brings us to Sally doing more research. She searches, she talks to fellow biomeds, she Googles, and she finds a great solution. So what did she find? She found OneQA. Yay. Why is that great? That is great because by finding a software solution that is capable of connecting to the test tool that is performing a test on a medical device, she can now build customized standardized test procedures for each of her assets in the hospital for every make and model that she has there. And all of those procedures can be easily followed by everyone on her team. By using software to document test results, she can insert pictures of the test setup, of all of the connections to each procedure that she created, and that will eliminate any confusion that any of her biomeds can have while they're performing those tests. By using software, she can now create one test report per asset simultaneously after the test has been complete. And all of those test results are, automatically populated in the software. You can watch them, appear there as the test is going on. And then once it's complete, all of her work orders will be automatically closed and uploaded to CMMS, which is amazing. So what did she achieve by using software for the documentation and archival processes? She decreased risk because she standardized on processes and she eliminated any confusion during the test procedure. She's now driving standardization, which is exactly what helps to decrease that risk. The point is that she documents electronically now, which allows her to standardize and store all of the results in one place. So how does that digital documentation affect the shop and people in the shop other than Sally? So our friend Joe here is a much happier person now. First of all, his PMs now are guided by the procedures that were created and approved by his manager. So now he doesn't make that many more errors and he doesn't have any rework anymore. His learning curve is shorter now because everything is guided and very easy to follow. He has no more questions about test setup because there are detailed pictures. They're very easy to follow. He's following the entire procedure the way he's supposed to. He's not missing any more steps. His data is now easily transferred into the CMMS where everything is stored in one place. And he finally has a lot more time to actually do the PMs. Jerry, how do you think software benefits the manager of the shop? Could you please comment on that?
Good, I'm glad you asked. So certainly the same benefit for Sally. She has driven standardization. So she has standard workflows or test procedures that are followed by everybody. They do it exactly the same way in the same step-by-step process. They complete the forms automatically. There are still some manual entries through the keyboard. So we didn't get rid of all the sources of human error, but we drastically reduced them. She has more time for other work because she's not having to review so many issues anymore. And onboarding is quicker because with what shortens the learning curve here is interoperability with the test instruments in the workflow and interoperability with the database. So end-to-end interoperability here is the big, big, big winner. No more audit anxiety because now she's standardized the work. Everything is coming in. She doesn't lose paperwork anymore. All of the work assignments are tied to her to the work assignment from the database about a particular serial number and asset tagged medical device. So there's no more confusion about, is this data really for this medical device that I'm looking? And no more file cabinets. Well, can we really say that? She has no more file cabinets about pen and paper documentation of test and measurement. Everything is done and collected end to end in an interoperable way on everything that they do, including the manual or the visual inspections of the medical device, including anything else that has a non-interoperable test instrument, like a ruler, like uh, a gap measurement tool, things that you use that are very manual and they don't have electronic interfaces. Even those automatically come into the single test result report, and it's wonderful.
Great, thank you, Jerry. I also see that our biomedical business unit manager, Michael Rake, has joined the conversation with us today. Michael, if you would like to add any comments to what we're talking about today, please feel free to do so at any time. All right, so we see that both Joe and Sally as a manager benefited from having digital documentation processes established in the shop right now. So look at that. Everyone's happy now. That's our takeaway. For her great effort and improved efficiency for the hospital, Sally gets recognized. Joe is now a happier guy. We discussed that already on how many of his pains were, alleviated because of switching to digital documentation, electronic processes. And Steve is glad that Sally's shop is fully compliant now. It has standard processes, and all of the documentation can now be easily traced and found in one place. And maybe, one day all three of them will even go and get some coffee together. And here, actually, I wanted to address one of the questions that we received in the Q&A section about connecting a software, so workflow automation software, to CMMS, whether that is necessary, or a software like OneQA, for example, whether it can send those results to other destinations. So for OneQA, yes, that is possible. You can export those test results that you have after the test procedure into your CMMS, or you can store them on your local drive, or any other drive attached to the computer where you're operating and performing the test procedures, and then you can email them or do whatever else you would like to do with them. So that's very easy, and it also allows you to do that in multiple formats.
Katya, this is Jerry. Sorry to interrupt, but
oh, no problem.
The database itself, the CMMS itself, once the work assignment is complete, has the ability to send email or in-mail, whatever it is within the hospital that matches up with their security and privacy policies. It can send the test report to the clinical unit that has the equipment. There's still that part of the workflow that has to happen. It's the final piece where we communicate back to the clinical units to confirm for them that preventive maintenance has been completed device by device for their department or their clinical unit. So that's, I think, a little bit more about what the question in the Q&A or in the chat was really trying to get to. So that usually happens out of the database. So OneQA doesn't need to do that. What OneQA needs to help us with is that interoperability with our test instruments, our visual guide to show us exactly how to make the connections that need to be made to run the test, automatic collection of the results from our test instrument, and also the sending those to the database so the database can tell whether the overall test result is pass or fail. Because on the pass, it can automatically close the work assignment, which is why Joe is so happy and Sally is so happy here. All right. So what about test instruments like I talked about that don't have that front end interoperability? It's no problem. We're simply back to a report where the measurement you see on the display screen of that test instrument, and everything else works in a normal way.
Correct. So The biggest result of this story is that now that we've removed many of the pain points in the shop and also provided an opportunity for standardization, for traceability, and improved compliance, the patients in that hospital are safer now. Great result. Any more comments from you, Jerry, or from you, Michael, before we move on to the Q&A?
I think the big comment that I have is I wish that we had had something like OneQA with that visual guidance and everything else, the interoperability. When I first started in as a biomed in the hospital back in the early 1970s. It's true that Fluke Biomedical has had automated test instruments for a very long time, well over 20 years. But to have that visual guidance and to be able to really begin talking about it with all of you in a way that makes sense in terms of your work and what you need to do every day, that's the big message I want to leave with you. And it really does solve audit trail issues. They simply seem to melt away once the auditor sees there's no place to go with any question or anything they're trying to poke on. The only other big thing that we can't solve that you have to help solve is, hey, what about those PM stickers and making sure the dates on all of those are up to date along with everything else. That's part of your workflow that you got to do. Make sure it's in there.
Thank you, Jerry. That was a great comment. And with that, thank you all very much for your attention to our story today. We hope that you learned something new. And before we move on to the Q&A, if you want to learn more about digital documentation and or OneQA workflow automation software, please go to flukebiomedical.com/OneQA. We have tons of good information there, and you can even download the software and try it for yourself for free and see where you like it, whether it benefits your shop. Thank you all very much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed our webinar. I hope you learned something new. If you have any more questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to either me or Jerry. We can copy our emails into the chat for you. So thank you all very much. I hope you are going to have a great day today, and we will see you in the next Empower webinar by Fluke Biomedical.